Why is memory so important? Very often, if you want to appreciate something, you have to think what life would be without it. If we did not have our memories, if every morning we woke up with a clean slate, a blank picture, and you have to rebuild everything anew. As we come from Memorial Day, the official beginning of the summer, good to give some thought to the power of memory and what life would be without it and what it contributes. And this is not just about living in the past and going back in time. It's about a memory that lives on and informs us and educates us and teaches us to learn from the mistakes and to improve on the good things. And without it, you actually don't have history. You don't have a future. So please join me as we honor and remember those that have fallen, and we remember everyone who contributed to our lives. Why is memory so important? The past gives birth to the future. The past gives birth to the future. Hi, this is Simon Jacobson, and we will be speaking in honor of Memorial Day. Why is memory so important? The past gives birth to the future. This class is dedicated by Seymour Allen and Rena Dorfman in honor of Rivka Bat Shlomo Salman. So when we talk about memory in general, at times, to really appreciate something, the best way is to look at what would life be without it. Imagine we did not have memory. God forbid. We woke up every morning, everything was erased. Our hard drives were erased. Blank slate, you start anew. I know some of us may prefer that, especially when we have something really negative we'd like to just eliminate. But you have to remember, there are many good things part of our lives. And just the routines. We don't have to memorize everything again. That itself is a tremendous blessing and gift. What would life be if we did not remember our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, our ancestors? The famous line that those who make mistakes in history are condemned to repeat it. They forget the past, they're condemned to repeat the bad past. That's on the negative side. On the positive side, all that has shaped us and defined us. What would a tree be like if it did not remember in the form of a seed the previous tree that bore the seed that would give birth to the next tree? But because we live in a world of the here and now, and of instant gratification, we often neglect to look at the bigger picture. So we look at, I'm right now, whatever's going on, that all that matters. And we only go back if there's no choice. But the wise person, the Talmud says, who is the wise person? The one who sees the birthing. Meaning he sees the future, the vision of where things are headed. But part of that is because he sees the past. That you see the seeds and the roots, and you look with that broad vision of the horizons, broader horizons, you'll also be able to see where things are headed. Because it's all about getting out of the myopic perspective, the narrow viewpoint of living in the immediate. So of course the immediate is the most important as we live it. We can't live in the past or live in the future. But it's all part of one process. It's a flow. In Judaism, one of the greatest and most dignified prayers is Yizkor, which means to remember. I remember you. Children who've lost their parents or close loved ones will gather during the holiest day of the year, Yom Kippur, and the same thing several other times of the year during holidays, and just to say a simple but most profound prayer: I remember you, and I honor you. And you mentioned your parents' name. Those that are blessed with parents obviously don't say it, but we have grandparents and great-grandparents. So it's not just a nice gesture. Even that's a powerful thing, to show gratitude. But it also shows that you're not an island unto yourself. You come from somewhere. And you recognize that you are a continuation of what came before you, and you are a link to the next generation of the chain. We're all links. In Kabbalah, Kabbalistic and Hasidic thought, there's a concept called Seder Hishtalshlus. It means the cosmic order. And the word Hishtalshlus is an interesting word in Hebrew. It comes from the word shalshelis, a chain. It's an understanding that life is never isolated points, that there's a unifying connection. Even when time and space may seem separate, it really all is one long flow. And therefore there's a way of looking at it from a bird's eye view, and that's where memory comes in. It's connecting you to that which came before you, which shaped you. That's why we say that our body has memories. Your cells have memories. And those memories can be generational. I'm not here to advocate or criticize the issue of generational trauma. I happen to reject it in most cases. But the point being is we definitely carry generational experiences. And as such, it also helps you understand yourself if you understand where you came from, our origins. The fact that the Bible lays out and says the human being was created in the divine image, Adam and Eve, male and female. And all of us descend from that, tells you have a divine image. And therefore you should live up to it. You have tremendous potential. So in that context, you see, that's just one example. The same thing, again, in biblical terms, you talk about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, people who personified love, reverence, compassion. So we have that love, reverence, compassion within us. And in that sense, to fully understand yourself today, you need to know who you are yesterday and who you were 2 days ago and who you were in generations past. So when we say Yizkor, when we remember, what we're doing is actually making that connection. Which leads us to another thing, the power of eternity. Everyone is seeking for that eternal connection. The fountain of youth, the pharaohs of old, modern science. It's all trying to preserve life forever. You want forever? Connect to your memory. Because your memory connects you to that which came before you and shapes you and shapes the future. So memory is more than just a nice thing. It actually is critical in respecting yourself and respecting the very essence of life. Now, obviously, memory comes into play, especially when there was tragedy. We remember the 6 million that were killed in such a horrific way. People who don't have stones to mark their graves. But we don't forget them. It teaches us also that souls live on forever. The souls and the legacies and the families and the values that they built live on forever. So it really goes and counters the very view of a very materialistic, empirical world, that all that matters is the here and now. To appreciate and respect that life goes on. It may not go on in this shape and form of this body, but life goes on. And today in science we know nothing can be destroyed. Matter turns into energy. Energy cannot be destroyed. The shape and form may be changed. So the same is true when the soul leaves the body after death. What happens is it just continues its journey, perhaps in another body or in other forms. Just like we take a liquid, ice and gas. That same liquid, that same cup of water, that's fluid, liquid, You freeze it, it becomes ice. You heat it, it becomes gas. All different forms of the same substance. So it's appreciating as well that eternity and the soulful element to it. Whenever I speak with people who unfortunately have suffered a tragedy, a loss, I always say one thing: the more soulful you are, the more connected you will be to that person. The more comforting you will have. Because if you look for material connections in a world where the material is very temporary and impermanent, you're not going to find eternal security, because everything physical is subject to change. It's mortal. It deteriorates, erodes, and ultimately perishes. But spirit never dies. So memory also links us in, plugs us in, into the eternal connection. So when you think of it that way, besides the respect that we show people who've given their lives to protect us, who have done tremendous achievements in this world. When I say tremendous, I don't necessarily mean they have to be headlines. Tremendous achievement could be a mother and father who sacrifice something to bring up their children. And parents know the little things we do that nobody recognizes necessarily. But all that becomes part of the memory of who we are. Take that away and we become real orphans. And I mean orphans in the fullest sense of the word, disconnected. Connection, attachment, is so critical to life, like oxygen. 9 months we spend in our mother's womb. That's not an accident. Healthy parents, as soon as when we're born, will continue to nurture us and cuddle us and hold us and embrace us. Connections. And all our lives we're looking for connections. For love, for care, for validation. And if you don't find it in a healthy way, you look elsewhere. What do you think an addiction at the end of the day is? It's what we would call an attachment disorder. You're attached to something, but to the wrong thing. To a drug, to alcohol, to a certain behavior. Psychological, emotional, physical. An addiction is a connection. That's why it's so powerful, because we look for these things to depend on. But you don't want it to be an unhealthy addiction. You want it to be an attachment to something beautiful. Take love. All of us seeking love. Where do we find relief for that longing? So if you find it in a healthy way, great. If not, you're going to find somewhere an outlet. And often it can be in a very destructive way. What people will do just to be loved, they'll sell themselves, compromise themselves, violate themselves. We all need connection and attachment. And memory is one of the aspects of that type of connection, attachment. When someone says, I don't remember my parents, I don't remember those that came before me, it's one of the saddest things to hear. Whatever the reason may be. So essentially, it's connected to the very essence of who we are as human beings. Which also leads us to another big question, which is how to find light in dark times. In other words, how to find and stay positive in the face of challenge or darkness. So as long as you're in a dark place, depressed, things aren't working out, so very often you stay that way. You become a victim of your own circumstances, of your own attitudes, of your own projections. So how do you free yourself from that? There's an expression in the Talmud that says, someone that's tied up in fetters, someone that's bound, cannot free themselves. You can't pull yourself out of a deep pit. You need someone to help you pull yourself out of it. In the words of scientists, or even Einstein, I believe, said this, you cannot solve a problem from the same system where the problem was created. So you need to go out of the system. Memory is one of the ways. Because memory can bring you those fond memories that you have as a child, memories that you were, stories that were told to you, experiences, memories you read about, the history of your own ancestry, the history of our people. Difficult times perhaps, but also positive ones. So what memory does is opens up the chambers of your consciousness And instead of living in that moment, which is so dark, close your eyes and you think of a brighter place. We're not talking about naivete or escapism or fantasy. We're just talking about opening up doors. Even those that have experienced trauma, serious trauma, if allowed, you can see in therapeutic situations, try to help them evoke a positive memory. Just to use an example from modern cinema, X-Men, right? Fictional characters turned into blockbuster films. And there you have the story of a Holocaust survivor who was later called Magneto. And his memory is terrible. How his mother was shot right in front of him. And the anger that built up within him. And that anger in turn turns into unbelievable power. But then when he starts training and harnessing that power, he's told by his colleague, yes, you have very much anger, but that can also lead to destructive ends. Also remember the serenity. And you see an image of he's seeing his mother before the Holocaust, lighting Shabbat candles. And it's when you can join those two forces together, all the rage and all the anger and the fury, and the wish for vengeance with serenity, that's when you truly will harness your power. So memory, yes, we will remember negative things. And thank God, memory fades. What you won't want to forget is positive things. So for every negative, remember a positive. Now I know that can be very confusing, especially for an adult who was hurt as a child, because if you have the same parent who one day loved you and a little later hurt you, you get confused. Is it love? Is it pain? Some people can't separate between the two because loving things cause you pain. Well, that's the work we have to do. But you don't want to lose sight of the beauty in our lives. Many people will talk about, I remember my bubby, my grandmother, my grandfather. It could be a vague memory, but it stays with you. And that's part of what I would suggest in any therapeutic situation. Help people access those closed doors, sometimes locked away. Those memories can help save our lives because they create a cognitive life raft upon which we can build. Of course, it's easier said than done, but it just demonstrates again. So when a person is in a darker place, positivity is very difficult to find right there and then when you feel so trapped. But it's not when you think, 1 second, this person who I'm sad about because they maybe passed away prematurely also left me a message, a legacy. I remember her or his beautiful lessons in life. And that too is part of who they are. And that lifts you out of the darkness. Now, of course, there's a time to cry and there's a time to celebrate. We don't minimize the need to recognize that. But it's all part of life cycles. The cycle of joy and of pain, of dancing and of grieving. Or as the psalmist puts it, those that sow in tears will reap with joy. Because tears can become tears that just overwhelm you, or they can become tears that are raindrops that give birth to the next generation, that give birth to the next stage in life. And to recognize that life is a process. It's constantly flowing. There's no isolated pieces, and definitely not fragmented ones, but it takes our effort to recognize that. Kierkegaard wrote famously that we can only understand our lives backwards, but we must live our lives frontwards. When you look back, you suddenly can connect dots and see a bigger picture, a narrative. Life, like a film, is not one frame. There are many frames. And you have to see it through. The Baal Shem Tov has the beautiful analogy of the spiral staircase, called in Yiddish Schwindeltreppe. What's Schwindeltreppe? It means swindling staircase. When you walk up a regular staircase, maybe many steps, but you see the destination. In a swindling staircase, it swindles you into thinking that you're not reaching the destination, because every time you make a turn, you have to turn your back to the destination. That means you could be standing right before the apex, the top, and think you have made no progress. Many of us make that mistake. We don't see it through. So life is a continuum, a mobile continuum. And appreciating that is all about memory as well. So memory in this context is not just remembering yesterday. It's remembering yesterday that shapes today, that shapes tomorrow. Maybe to put it more poetically, the yesterday that forms today, that will shape tomorrow. Then when you learn from the past, you improve in the present, and you make it even better in the future. So when we think about Memorial Day, and that's the springboard for this conversation, but it's truly one universal throughout the year, it elicits, no pun intended, all the memories about memory. The prayers I mentioned, the idea of connecting. You celebrate a birthday, you celebrate an anniversary, someone you love. You go back in time and say, remember when we first met in this location. We all know the magic of going back, of reconstructing. Or more importantly, the way that Arizal, the saintly Isaac Luria, the great mystic of the 15th century, 16th century, the way he put it was on the verse in the book of Megillah, of Esther. So it says, these days shall be remembered and recreated. Niskarim v'nasim. So he asked, what's that? Remembered, I understand. You remember those days, you commemorate them. But he's saying when you remember them properly, you're actually recreating them, because energy and time flow like a spiral, so they come back to the same axis. So every birthday is not just remembering your birthday then, you are drawing the same energy every year in that day. So when you go back in time and space, so to speak, to the place of something that happened, it's not just a distant memory, you're recreating it now. You're channeling it into your life. So a birthday is not just remembering you were born, it's you were being reborn. And the same thing with every holiday and every anniversary and every experience that we celebrate annually or at other intervals. These are powerful concepts that help us appreciate life in its broadest sense, and allows us to get out of the trap of the immediate. On the contrary, it actually informs the immediate. So just because you see a bird's eye view doesn't mean you're ignoring what's on the ground, but the big picture informs the small picture. And then the small picture is never the same, because it's part of that continuum. It's how you can it makes it easier to deal with loss, with disappointments, with setbacks. You come to realize everything is a lesson. At the moment, it may be very difficult. No one's denying that. But you see the continuum and you allow it to turn. I think that one of the first, maybe the first Ferris wheel that was invented in Austria and Vienna. It's a famous Vienna Ferris wheel. The World's Fair at that time, sometime in the late 19th century. I don't know if it was the first actual one, but one of the first famous ones. So there was an individual who came to the fifth Chabad Rebbe, Rav Shalom Ber, known as the Rebbe Rashab, the author of the classic discourses, Samach Vav, Ayin Beis, that I teach every day. And this person was bemoaning the fact that his luck has gone bad, sour. He once had money, he had a successful business, and now it's going down. At the time, I think a picture of the Vienna Ferris wheel arrived, and the Rebbe saw the picture, or heard about it, or read about it, and he told him, what do we learn from a Ferris wheel? That it's a turning wheel. A galgal hachayzer, it's always turning. Those all the way on the top, you can rest assured they will come down. And those on the bottom, rest assured they will go up. That's how you have to look at life. So obviously, we'd always like to be riding high, but you don't look at the high and the low as two separate things. They're part of one continuum. And maybe when things are seem to be not working out, the best time to assess, to evaluate, to find out what was done wrong, and learn from it. But either way, not to allow that to be the end of the story. It continues. I met someone who once lost, unfortunately, lost a spouse at a young age. She tells me, and I remember she's signing her email as well this way, at the end, all will be good. If it's not good, it means it's not the end. Now, this is coming from someone that went through it. I'm not talking about the nice cliche. So memory covers all of this, understanding the picture of things. You still have to fight the battles of the present. You have to deal with enemies and deal with whatever is out there. But you come very different, armed with a whole new arsenal when you come not just yourself. You know that you're a midget that's standing on the shoulders of giants that came before you, and that we're one continuation. We don't come alone. And that gives us eternal power. Power to perpetuate, power to forge ahead, the power to overcome any challenge. And one final point, which is so relevant to our times. Now, Israel's in the news. The war being fought there. And you see a war being fought against the Jewish people. Just look at the propaganda. It's so mind-boggling. Completely false narratives. But remember, the Jewish people are here for almost 4,000 years. So, all those that oppress them, all those that try to annihilate them, are long gone. Whether it's the Egyptians, or the Assyrians, or the Babylonians, or the Greeks, or the Persians, or the Romans. And the list goes on. The Crusaders and the Inquisitions and the pogroms and the Holocaust. And now, look what happened. October 7th, no one talks about that anymore. Now it's like the false narrative that the oppressed are the oppressors. But the good news is we don't forget, and our memories connect us to those generations. So we don't come alone. We have 4,000 years that we stand upon. And we know the names of our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, all the way back to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, in unbroken chain. I'm not saying that just out of pride, even though it's tremendous pride, but it's out of power. That's the strength we have. And that's why we don't need to succumb to viciousness and to anger and to all the negative elements that you see in hateful people, the demonic hatred that they have, because we have what to stand on. So we will fight our battles, but we come with generations and generations of power that informs and empowers us right now. One application from what we're discussing here. So hold on, my friends, to that very deep treasure called your memory, your memories of your loved ones, of the good things that have happened in your life. And a simple suggestion, no matter what state of mind you're in, what mood you're in, why don't you recollect someone that did a favor for you years ago? Maybe as a little child in school. Maybe in a different environment. It could be a relative, it could be a stranger. And write them a note. Or call them. And say, I'd like to just thank you for something. Say, what are you thanking me for? And tell them. I assure you, not only will it bring a smile to their face, but also to your face. Because these are the connections that really give us life. So hold on to them dearly. They can be the difference between life and death. They can be the difference between a happy life and a meaningful one, and one that is going nowhere, where you feel lost amidst a mass of isolated and fragmented pieces. Connections, attachments, memories. This has been Simon Jacobson, Meaningful Life Center. MeaningfulLife.com is our website where you can find this and many of our, or all of our many programs, which really cover the entire spectrum of life, literally. Check it out, MeaningfulLife.com. Please subscribe to our offerings, subscribe to our growing and robust YouTube channel. Constantly posting new material. We have a calendar of programs and events that, as I said, address all human issues and dilemmas. And please share. If you found this meaningful, please share with others. Sharing is part of the connection. I'd love to hear your thoughts, feedback, comments, as always. Be blessed, be well. May your memories, your beautiful memories, shine through you and into the future. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by the Meaningful Life Center. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at meaningfullife.com/donate.